Hello, I am Wakita Barksdale and I am your instructor for your social psychology class. I'm really excited about going through this journey with you. Um, I have designated Tuesdays and Thursdays for office hours. So from 5 to 6 Eastern Standard Time, I am available. You feel free to give me a call at that time. If you need, you can send me an email at my email address for Remington, and I will give you, I'll respond as soon as possible. There is one thing that I love about Remington is that they provide so many resources for you in terms of being able to understand the information that is being taught and being presented. Please take the time to read and take the time to really study and look at the information. One thing about psychology is that you're going to see the same theories, you're going to see the same theories, you're going to see the same definitions over and over and over again. So you will likely become very familiar with it just by engaging in the material. Um, a couple of things that I want to remind you of: your discussion boards and a response to a peer due on Wednesdays. When you respond to your peer, please engage a little more fully versus just saying, "Great job, I agree." I really would like to see you go in and be able to show that you understand the material in the text. So you always score extra points with me if you quote or cite the text and show that you've actually read the material. One discussion boards due Wednesday. Friday, your assignments are due, and then on Sunday, your quizzes are due. The final exam is going to be due on Thursday of the last week. So please keep that in mind. It will not be due on Sunday, but on Thursday of the final week. We have a lot of things that these particular chapters that you read this week talks, really gives you an overview of psychology. Psychology is a broad field that really contains the study of human thought, behavior, development, personality, emotion, and so many other things. We figure out in psychology what motivates people, what drives people to, or not, doesn't drive people to doing what they do. And that's really what it's about. It's never to, we study psychology to do several different things, and that's one of the things that you'll see in your text right off is that psychology, I lost my place, is really about being able to I know where it was in the text, because one of the things that I want to do is make sure that I give you some of the things that are on the quiz so you can say, oh, we went over that. But the reason that people study psychology is so that you can understand and predict behavior. It's not to eliminate behavior at all. Basically in psychology, you take what you study and what you find and you use it to better society. So you develop things that are going to improve society, but you don't necessarily try to change people, but we do begin to understand why people behave the way that they do. Um, Psychologists seek to understand the factors that influence behavior and then apply this knowledge for the public good. So, one of the examples that you'll see in the lecture outline is that they take the information that they have and then figure out how to effectively treat depression. So, that's a positive thing. And And that's eliminating more so a problem in society than it is a behavior. Psychologists also use theories as a means to propose reasons for relationships among events such as perception and feelings of anxiety. Gaining a richer and deeper understanding of psychology can help people achieve insights into their own actions as well as better understanding of others. I'll say a lot of times that my psychology degree has helped me in all areas of my life because it helps me to be able to understand how to relate to others and be a little bit more empathetic when it comes to how we look at how people behave or what they're doing. You know, you don't take things as personal when you study psychology because you understand that there are so many different things that cause people to behave the way that they do. For every action is a reaction. We understand, a lot of times that trauma and things like that people may not even understand starts really fueling how they behave. And that's a lot of what psychologists do. Psychology is the study of the mind and behavior. Research in psychology seeks to understand and explain how people think, act, and feel. Um, Psychologists, they really try to learn more um, about the things that impact how we think and how we behave, um, so that they can explain why we think the way we do and why we behave the way we do. There are so many different areas of psychology, and they're listed out in your book. But school psychology, educational psychology, developmental psychology, personality psychology, social psychology, industrial and organizational psychology. That's when they go into different companies and they try to figure out how the company operates and how the company could operate better. So there are so many ways that you could utilize a psychology background, and not only personally but professionally. Um, Topics such as development, personality, emotions, it there's so many things that psychology kind of deals with that it would be hard for me to give you all of them or even for the book to list all of them because every factor of how we exist, how we function is studied in psychology. Um, a lot of times we look at psychologists as um, these people who are just trying to get into our heads and manipulate certain thoughts. So, but it's not like that. It's really about really helping us understand behavior and mental processes. As simple as that. Um, the primary goal for a psychologist is to help describe, explain, predict, and often influence human behavior. Psychologists are guided by scientific principles and critical thinking. So when they are doing research and when they do come up with, things that they want to resolve, this isn't just um, random. There are 9 principles, and it is to be skeptical, insist on evidence, examine definitions of terms, examine the assumptions of your argument, and be cautious in drawing conclusions for evidence. Then you would consider alternative interpretations of your research evidence. So you don't just assume that because this was your finding, that this was the outcome, that this is exactly how this is supposed to be. You consider alternative interpretations. Do not generalize. Don't oversimplify. And then you apply critical thinking to all areas of life. Scientific method is an organized way of using experience and testing ideas to expand and define knowledge. Psychologists who engage in research are guided by its principles. Psychologists usually begin by formulating a research question. Next, they study the research question, which we call a hypothesis. And a hypothesis is a statement about behavior or mental processes that is testable through research. So it's not a hypothesis if you can't test it. Next, psychologists examine the research question through control methods. And then finally, they draw conclusions. Um, and your book outlines this process. In the first chapter, let me see. So that you understand um, that this is, let's say, page 14, the scientific method is basically what it's called. It's a systematic way of organizing and expanding scientific knowledge. And it goes step by step. And there's a nice little chart that explains the scientific method on that page as well. So when you go through and you're learning how to communicate what you are trying to figure out, you create a hypothesis. And then you examine it through control methods. And, usually you have a control group, and things like that in research. And we'll get to that a little later. And then you would draw your conclusions based on the outcomes. And that's after you've looked at every single option or interpretation of your outcomes. Because believe me when I say, when findings are created, there are going to be peers in the field who are going to test this. And a good thing about an experiment is that it can be redone. It can be duplicated, and you're going to get very similar outcomes. It says that in research, only a sample can be studied. Samples must be drawn so that they accurately represent a particular population. I think that this really, when you start talking about research, it also went into, a lot of the discussion board question about the about using animals to test, and your answers were very, very, very interesting. I may have said this before, but I want to make sure I say it again. When you respond on your discussion boards on Wednesday to your peer, make sure that you give more information than just great answer or I agree. I want to see that you are indeed understanding the material. So I definitely want to see more thorough responses to your peers. Tell them what you agree with, tell them what you don't agree with, and then use the material, cite the material to explain how our text backs up that information. Okay. So the emergence of psychology as a separate and independent field of study came about around 1879 when the first experimental psychology lab was developed and established. The work that was done was really focused on describing the structures that compose the mind. This perspective relied heavily on the analysis of sensations and feelings, which was very subjective. It was a very subjective process. But the theorists at that time believed that properly trained individuals would be able to identify accurately the mental processes that accompanied feelings, sensations, and thoughts. Most of the time, when I look at, and I'm looking back at my timeline of just um, the schools of thoughts, most of them formed because people were just trying to figure out and explain human behavior and how we think. Each and every time when you came up with structuralism, psychoanalysis, the humanistic approach, in the 1960s and 70s, you had the cognitive revolution. All of these things, and the cognitive revolution, which I think is really, really interesting, was about investigating the internal mental processes. And those are just things like thinking and decision making, language development, and memory. But I think it's important that you recognize what psychology is, and it's just really the examination of behavior, which I've said before, and mental processes. When you understand that going in foundationally, you'll be able to pick up what else is being taught. When it comes to psychology, it really is a fascinating field, because you look at why you behave the way you do, why you think the way you do, and how all of those things come together to create what happens in our society. We can look at so many theories in psychology and understand exactly what's going on in politics, understand what's going on with our food industry, so many things, the media. And that's what psychologists do. They are researching and trying to figure out so they can explain what's happening right now. And as society matures and as it develops, even psychology will become more and more advanced, so that we continue to begin to understand really what we do and how we do it. Psychology is both an applied and theoretical discipline. So basically what that means is that research in psychology seeks to understand and explain how we think, act, and feel. It's devoted to the diagnosis and treatment of mental illness or mental health issues. There are many different specialty areas in psychology. We talked about that. And then let's talk about how we apply psychology. And I'm just kind of going through my notes because I want to make sure that I don't, bore you just by rambling, but because I'll get into this and I'll just start talking. So I want to make sure that I give you what's relevant. But the different applications for psychology is the field of mental health, where psychologists use principles, research, clinical findings to help clients manage and overcome symptoms of mental distress and psychiatric illness. Basically, the point is to help people live better and healthier lives. When we look at the major perspectives of psychology, we have the psychodynamic perspective that was originated with the work of Sigmund Freud. And this is basically just to emphasize the role of the unconscious mind. Then you go into psychoanalysis, and everybody, when you hear psychoanalysis, you immediately know we're talking about Sigmund Freud. And he has the id, the ego, and the superego. So let me tablet is going to die. So then, behavioral psychology is a perspective that focuses on learned behavior. Um, it really looks at behaviorism, and that it differed from many other perspectives because instead of emphasizing what's going on the inside, internal conflict and things like that, it focused on basically how we behave. And behaviorists, all they're trying to do is change that behavior. They're trying to they may substitute a behavior for a behavior, but that is the point. Um, they basically believe that behaviors are learned and reinforced. The principles you'll see are usually what therapists call techniques, and they treat a variety of mental health illnesses. Then you have the cognitive perspective. Um, this focuses on mental processes, so thinking, problem solving, decision making, memory, language, things like that. And Albert Bandura was a huge one in this. This perspective has really taken hold lately. So they use information processing models and really try to conceptualize how information is received, how it's processed, used, and stored. Then you have the biological perspective. The study of physiology played a major part in this as well, in developing psychology as a separate discipline. Biopsychology, physiological psychology, they all focus on the physical and biological basis of behavior. Things like nervous system, genetics, the brain, the immune system, that all plays into that, making sure that those things are balanced and understanding when something is off. And all of that's developed over time, because if you can imagine how even in the DSM-5, which is what we utilize to diagnose mental illness, it's changed so many times, and there are different diagnoses that no longer are relevant because psychology and psychiatry has developed over time. Then you have the perspective of evolution, and we all know what that is. The humanistic perspective is another one, and Carl Rogers is an important theorist in this, and Abraham Maslow, that's someone who's familiar as well. So as you go in and you look at how we think about human thought, the mental processes, and behavior, these different perspectives allow us to kind of develop different perspectives of psychology, and it allows you to approach problems in different ways. You figure out what really is your school of thought, and it gives you, when we went back and we said look at the different interpretations of when you are researching and when you are analyzing something, these different schools of thought provide that possibility within this science. Psychology is such a rich and vast area, and I really am interested in seeing how you all begin to apply the different theories and begin to really figure out what you align yourselves with. Um, so I want you to really take the time to look at psychology and say, this is really about understanding how we think and how we behave. And as you go through this mod, focus on that and look at it from that perspective. It'll be interesting to see you beginning to understanding understand why the people in your life, the people at work, the people around you, you start looking at how they behave and why they behave the way that they do. I always get from my family, stop analyzing me. And I'm not analyzing you, I'm just helping myself understand why you are responding the way that you are. I think it helps us to, be kinder and be more patient and more tolerant of certain things. So I wanted just looking through to make sure that I didn't miss anything. I really found, again, the discussion between whether or not we should, or whether or not scientists should use animals as test subjects, when they cannot, to conduct research that cannot be carried out on other humans. So you test animals first and let everything go wrong on the animal, and then you say, okay, this is safe for us to test on a human. And what it came down to in reading a lot of their responses was that you felt like this was either a moral issue or an ethical issue, um, or you felt like the greater good of human beings, you know, kind of cleaned out or explained away any wrongdoing that this could have. Um, my thought was, and one that I found interesting once before was, if we were found not to be at the top of the hierarchy, if there was another being above us, would we still feel that it's okay to do research on us? So, because a lot of us said that, we're at the top of the food chart, right? We are the alphas, okay? So, that for our greater good, we sacrifice animals. So, in that theory, if there is found to be aliens who are out there and they come and take us and they do research on us and they, do certain things so that they can basically figure out what's going on with them for their greater good, does that logic still apply? Um, it was funny because someone wrote, um, "Buy fake, not fur," and I thought that was cute. So, um, and not in a condescending way, just that it's a good way to think about what all of this kind of how all of this plays into what we do, and how as time and society progresses, the thoughts behind what we do change, because killing animals for clothing was okay and largely received, but now we're at a time where it's not. um, and so I am I think I'm done, but for the most part of going through the material. Um, Make sure that you, um, when you get ready to take your quiz, that you understand how psychology is defined, which I've said that a lot of times today. Um, Look at what membership in an ethnic group is defined by. We talked about what a hypothesis is, what critical thinking incorporates. Um, you definitely want to understand um, what the experiment process involves. Um, Look at the peripheral nervous system and other things concerning the biological portion of your reading. And I think you'll be fine. Understand the different schools of study as well. And I've gone over those probably redundantly because I had notes kind of everywhere where I was just wanting to make sure that I covered as much as I could. Um, so again, if you have any questions, please make sure that you reach out to me. We will look at the lecture for week 2. I'll try to put that earlier in the week so that those of you who took the quiz early will have access to the lecture. But I think that's it for today. And I really hope that you are reading your material. Don't forget to look at what the requirement, the rubrics are for your different assignments, so that you will maximize your points and your grade. I am excited to be here with you all, and I look forward to speaking with you.